Okay, awesome. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this community conversation on engaging Black youth in civic engagement. My name is Rachael Payton. I'm the founder and president of BeGreatDC. Super excited to be here tonight to talk to you all about this topic. We have two amazing organizations and panelists that will be telling us a little bit more about what they do. This is a quick conversation, so we're going to go ahead and dive into our questions, and then we'll try to have a little bit of time towards the end for some audience questions. Does that sound good to you all? Alrighty. Oh, so sorry. Let me grab my questions. Okay, here we go. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and also what organization you're with and what you do specifically for the organization. Allyson, I guess we can go ahead and start with you.
Sure, I'm happy to start. Good evening, everyone. I'm Allyson Criner Brown. I use she and her pronouns. I am currently the Associate Director of Teaching for Change. Although as some folks know, I'll actually be transitioning from this role, but Teaching for Change is celebrating its 30th anniversary. Our tagline is building social justice, starting in the classroom. We do that by reviewing children's books and providing book recommendations to teachers around how to teach for social justice. We produce our own curriculum and resources for educators to bring into the classroom. And then we also bring teachers and educators together through workshops, working groups, and convenings and connect them to learning opportunities, particularly those teachers who are really trying to teach, explore the question of what does it mean to teach for social justice? What do my students need to learn to see themselves and the change makers that they can be, in the world. So I'll pause there, and I'm very happy to be with you this evening.
Absolutely. That's amazing and much needed work. So thank you, Allyson. Samantha, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Samantha Davis. I use she, they pronouns. I am the founder and executive director of Black Swan Academy. Black Swan Academy, we are a nonprofit organization here in DC, and we strive to give Black youth, middle school and high school, the tools as well as the opportunities they need to be leaders and change agents within their communities. And so we support them in engaging in direct action and public policy, organizing and advocacy work, and support youth-led campaigns. Currently, I'm supporting them in their Black youth agenda, looking at investments in education and divestments in policing and criminalization.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You guys both kind of work on opposite sides of the spectrum, but they seem to go hand in hand. Samantha, can you speak a little bit more about the work that your organization has been doing specifically in the pandemic, and also how the renewed focus on Black Lives Matter on a national scale, but also in DC, which also can be considered local and national at the same time. How has that renewed focus kind of impacted your work this year?
Yeah, so the pandemic hit the DC community hard, the DC Black community hard, right? Over 80% of the coronavirus deaths are Black people here in DC. And so for us, it shifted our work in a number of ways. One is it allowed us to remember how important mutual aid is to organizing work. And so we've been meeting the immediate needs of our young people, the families, and the broader community through the DC Mutual Aid Network, and providing basic essentials, groceries, hygienes, diapers, paying for medication, whatever the need is. We've also moved everything virtually, and so had to build our infrastructure to do digital organizing in a way that we haven't done ever in the past.
Right.
And knew that regardless of the pandemic that we were going to, and before the uprising, we had already known that organizing was going to be needed in this moment. And so we continue to engage middle school and high school youth in organizing and advocacy work, engaging council, engaging city leaders, and pushing efforts forward around intra-community violence, around police violence, around affordable housing, and a few other issues. And the moment around the uprising and this much greater focus on Black Lives Matter that has kind of been mainstreamed, it's just a echo and a reminder to the work that we've been committed to since day one, that we need to ensure that the work that we are doing both meets the immediate needs as well as pushes for systemic change, addresses systemic racism and white supremacy, and we have also locally been very much involved in the call to defund the police and redirect and allocate those millions and millions of dollars to the resources that allows our communities to be safe and to be healthy and to be equitable. And so been doing a lot of work in this moment around police-free schools and ensuring that we have things like counselors, like violence interrupters, like supporting teachers instead of the $30+ million that we're spending on policing our young people.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. And as I mentioned previously, you guys kind of both work on this on different ends of the spectrum. From both of your perspectives, what do you think that schools, particularly in DC, what can schools do more to encourage and empower Black youth to get involved civically and civic leadership and empower, I mean, not only by just giving them the skills and the resources to do so, but also empower them in the sense of giving them the courage to do so, because that's not an easy ask or, or task of an adult, let alone a student.
So I'll say to exactly what you said at the end there, that's not necessarily an easy task as an adult.
Right.
A lot of educators have a lot of relearning themselves to do about U.S. history, about a lot of the assumptions that we're bringing into the moment. There is a tremendous history of organizing in this country that has been led by Black people, that has been led by women, that has been led by Indigenous, Latinx, Chicano, the labor movement. Organizing is how social change has been moved forward in this country. Absolutely. But that doesn't fit very conveniently with the narratives that we get that are mostly about these great white men. And then you sprinkle in, a few folks, your Martin Luther Kings, and, now it's Barack Obama's. Right. And what happens is the traditional education that people, including a lot of educators, have gotten is that we've just had these great moments and these great people who come along in history, and they don't understand the role of the Women's Council in the Montgomery bus boycott. They don't understand that it has been everyday people who look just like them. It's been young people. The Young People's March was one of the pivotal moments in the civil rights movement. And so we actually have, what we are particularly seeing is that adults are now using this moment to say, we actually need to learn more about what anti-racism means, but also how does that connect to the history of this country? And those are the people who guide our young people. When Teaching for Change, our work is primarily making sure we get the right materials into the hands of parents and caregivers and teachers, who are, two of the forces that are going to be most impactful in shaping how young people see themselves, how they see the world, and how they see the role that they can play in that. One thing quickly I have to mention while we're on, to make some connections to the work that Samantha does. So Teaching for Change actually is a hub of resources for Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action, which is usually the first week of February. This year, the national organizers have said we need a year of purpose. So we actually have a lot of resources for free, teachingforchange.org. You go to our DC area Educators for Social Justice, and we invite groups like BYP 100, Black Lives Matter DC, Howard University, to actually help us get resources out to teachers, because they are hungry for this. They know their students are hungry for it. They are helping their students process and make connections to what's happening right now. There are 13 principles of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're encouraging teachers to bring those into classrooms. There were 10 demands from the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. The Black Panther Party had its list of demands. You actually really can look across history and see where, again, it's people who have been pushing for change. Organizing is the way that we do it, by coming together. And so there are things to draw on. This actually is not out of the norm in U.S. history. If this was 150 years ago, we would have been the abolitionists, and there are still abolitionists happening today. So we see that as young people are making sense of the world and stepping into their place, which is where you need organizations like Black Swan. The adults in their lives need this as well to better understand the moment we're in, and how we actually really can make change and lay the groundwork for continued change where young people see themselves in that role.
Absolutely. I love that. You mentioned something that I think is always important to reiterate. It's not enough to not be racist, but we have to talk about being anti-racist and define what that means and what that looks like. Samantha, did you want to speak a little bit to that question as well?
Yeah, I think Allyson did an amazing job in answering that question. The only thing I would add is we were talking earlier, for those who came in a little bit earlier, just about how courageous young people are, right? It's really the adults who have the learning to do, the unconditioning and the unpacking to do. Young people are impacted as well, but when we give space and create safe spaces for young people to use their imagination, right, to imagine a world that is free, that is just, that is liberated, where they are able to make mistakes without fear of engaging in the carceral system. When we create space for young people to explore and imagine that type of world, then they run with it. And so what we're seeing in this moment, like we've seen throughout history, to Allyson's point, is young people are the ones who are truly leading the way. And I think it's up to us as adults. I really feel like we're obligated, especially if we're serious about our commitment to the well-being of young people, if we're serious about our commitment to racial justice, to not being racist, if we're serious about our commitment to liberation, then we really need to do the work to unlearn, unpack, to question some of the ways we've been conditioned, and to get out the way, to invest and trust in the young people. Because what I've seen in 2020, right, during a pandemic, is that young people are the ones who are going to get us to liberation. They're the ones, if we follow their lead and invest and trust in them, they're the ones who are going to create the change.
Absolutely. This year has been excruciatingly long for a lot of us. Speaking of 2020, the past 7 months, you know, are there any particular standout stories, either with Teaching for Change or Black Swan Academy, that you all would like to share in regards to the work that you've been able to accomplish and do this year in the midst of a pandemic?
Yeah, I would say we've, thankfully we already had a lot of our curriculum resources online. We got a flood of attention after CNN did that first town hall with Sesame Street back in June. So Beverly Daniel Tatum shouted out social justice books, and we've just gotten a flood of people who've come to us for resources. So, we know that the hunger is there. We know that people are using our book lists and our curriculum. And I always tell people, think back to not just, that teacher that you had when you were in middle school, high school, maybe it was elementary school, who really made you see that you could do something in this world. Think about what book it was that you read that made you say, and see yourself or see the potential, or make you think that you could do something that maybe, you didn't think you could do. We believe that getting the right materials into the right hands, we can really support our young people to drive the change that needs to be needed. And what, Samantha and I were talking about the different ways that the young people are coming back at us, and they want to be a part of making change right now. And, I've got such stories even from my own first grader. It makes a difference, the books that we read with her. We're at home, we are absolutely leaning on, some of these, TV station and, Netflix and Hulu, honestly, a lot of parents are leaning on things that are already created to help us at home in educating our students and guiding them. And people need to know that we have resources that are actually built around helping young people see themselves and learn about others in an anti-racist and a truly multicultural with authentic voices light. And there's learning for us all to do right now. And so people are really hungry for it. Teachers need support to do it. And, young people and the adults that are working to really support them. We have no greater charge, and now is the time.
Yeah.
I just dropped 2 links in the chat for folks to look at in their. But I would say in the past 7 months, the things that stick out most are, again, the amount of organizing that has taken place, just how resilient and powerful Black communities, BIPOC communities are in DC and nationally. So what sticks out are the over 15,000 people that testified at the Metropolitan Police Department budget hearing earlier in this summer, who submitted written testimonies, who made videos, who called in, prioritizing the life and the well-being and the love of Black people and Black young people. And again, deprioritizing that policing and criminalization that we have seen so much in the media over the past few months. I think about the Police Free Schools car caravan, young people completely shifting how we organize, saying, let's get a yellow school bus to be symbolic of education, and to have young people riding across DC, targeting council members to say, right, treat us with dignity and love, going to council members' houses, demanding that they remove police from schools and that they invest in the life and well-being and the learning of young people. And then also, we've had the opportunity, the March on Washington was this year. And so we had an opportunity to speak at that March on Washington in Swan in London to youth organizers with Black Swan Academy. We're able to, right, on a national platform, talk about the work that they do, talk about the value of youth activism, the value of civic leadership, and demand the police-free schools action be not just here in DC, but really something that people take a hold of nationally. And so it's been a pandemic, but a lot of work has been happening, and the way people have been caring for each other, especially shout out to the DC Mutual Aid Network, the way we've all just been being able to live in a very abundant way almost during a time that resources are scarce. The way we've been able to share resources, share information, and pull everything together to support one another, I think in spite of the pandemic, has been beautiful.
Yeah.
Can I offer just very quickly, particularly with regards to the pandemic?
Yeah.
Teaching over distance learning is really hard. It's really hard, and it's really making people question, what is the role? What is the purpose of an education in a democracy? So a lot of teachers are really, what is it that my students really need to learn and need to understand? And if you are not making connections to that in this moment, then I think we need a fundamental questioning of, again, what is the purpose of education, particularly in a democracy? We are not just turning out end of the line assembly workers.
Right.
So that is something that we have actually directly seen that a lot of teachers who really understand that teaching also means teaching for this moment, which is really teaching for the future. There's a connection for what's happening outside the walls and what's happening in students' education. And that's something that teachers have been leaning into. You know, why did they go into teaching in the first place?
Yeah.
Who are the young people that we're shaping? And it's an area where, you know, they've definitely been turning to Teaching for Change for that support. But there are going to be some continuing questions. Again, what is it that our young people really need to learn and understand? What is the kind of education that we are giving them? And, you know, those of us who worked with Black youth have known for years that their education, I'll speak for myself too, my own education did not only happen in the four walls of the classroom, but that's also a problem that needs to be integrated. So I'll pause there, but I think that's a particular connection when we're talking about youth and civic engagement and distance learning. You start making some connections there about the conversations that we need to have.
I was gonna go ahead.
No, go for it, Samantha.
I was just gonna, like, to that point around like education and being able to think about what does education look like now, what does it need to look like. There has been witnessing, like the Washington Teachers Unions, and I'm sure many members that have been involved with Teaching for Change, right, demanding from the chancellor and others about really thinking intentionally about reopening, right, and being activated in that moment and taking this time for some to really question what does like a liberatory education system look like, an education system where every young person's needs are met, and that we're not doing the work for the majority of the young people, but we're doing the work for all of the young people. Because if one young person is pushed out, if one young person has a bad experience, then we're failing. And so that has been pretty amazing to witness. There's still a long way to go. But you have seen this opportunity kind of open up to give people space to rethink and to dream a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I'm not sure if we've had any questions come from the audience yet, but if not, I do have, one final question for the two of you. What can we do now, currently, and also just moving forward, ongoing, to support Black youth? And when I say we, people that may not be as intrinsically involved in organizations such as the two that you are involved in, but just kind of from the outside looking in, what can people do to support Black youth?
That is a whole nother panel in and of itself. I'll say you know, specific to, to this event and the conversation and in our organizations. I'll just say coming, as a Teaching for Change representative, certainly, and just even as someone who's a DC resident, like support the mutual aid, support the organizers, support the people who are really doing the work right now. So that's something I particularly want to say. Particularly the smaller organizations really do need the financial support right now. I think a lot of people who are doing on the ground, work are making questions, are having questions about how they're really going to be able to continue to sustain that. So, for this audience, I think that needs to be said to continue to support the work, particularly where it's happening. And I'll say, just for Teaching for Change, one of our big asks is, share the resources that we have with your networks, with the parents in your life. Our social justice books is getting a lot of attention. There's an education project. Share that with the teachers in your life. But also, we've gotten a lot of requests from people who are saying, my church or my synagogue or my faith-based group, we want to have a book discussion, or we want to talk about some of these issues. So these conversations are relevant outside of education as well. But I would certainly say we want to be informed, as we come into that. So there's a lot of self-informing work that can happen right now, and Teaching for Change is certainly positioned to do that. So yeah, share us with the teachers and the parents in your life. We have a lot of free resources, and come see us when you're ready to have those conversations about racial justice.
Amen. Thank you, Allyson. Samantha?
Yeah, I would add, I know there's a lot of folk in the philanthropic sector and the nonprofit sector on this call. And I said on a panel I spoke on earlier today that it is not enough to say Black Lives Matter. It is not enough to fund racial equity. What folk need to do to support Black youth is do the internal work. Do the internal work to ensure that you are becoming an anti-racist organization, that you are questioning and examining the ways in which your institution perpetuates white supremacy, perpetuates systemic racism, and that you are also creating space at an individual level, that you're creating space for young people to be themselves, to be their full authentic selves, that you're having age-appropriate conversations. Allyson, I think, is a model as a parent on the conversations she was sharing that she's having with her children. And so that is important. Create the space for young people to engage, for young people to ask questions, especially now when everything is so visible in the light. Don't hide what's happening to Black people in this country. Don't hide what's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania. And to that point, I will also add, just because we have a new president does not mean the work ends. And so continue to push, continue to hold folk in office accountable. Because Joe Biden or Trump, neither of them are going to get us free on their own. And so we have to still do the work and be just as committed, if not more, than we were before the election.
Yeah, and neither is the president after Biden. This is a long-term, lifetime commitment. Thank you so much, Samantha and Allyson, for your time and for this conversation. It's been a great dialogue. Thank you so much to the audience for your engagement, and also thank you to the catalog for hosting this platform and allowing us to have this conversation. We are just at time, and so we are going to head over to the main stage. We could talk more about getting engaged locally and share some reflections on our conversations tonight. So thank you all. Stay uplifted, stay encouraged, and have a great evening.
And thank you, Rachael.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.